Wilco van Rooyen was one of the climbers rescued from the K2 mountain in 2008 after being stuck for 3 days in the death zone without a sleeping bag, food, or water. Fortunately, he was plucked from the mountain by a helicopter after he mysteriously made his way down from the icy upper reaches of the pyramid-shaped peak. This is his story, so stay tuned. The climbing tragedy consisted of 6 teams, which comprised of the Norwegian team, namely Lars Nessa, Rolf Bae, and Cecilia Skog, who were a couple. The Norrit team, which included Wilco van Rooyen, Cas van de Gevel, Geir McDonald, and Pemba Gyalye Sherpa. The Korean team, which included Hyung Kyo Park, Hyo Gyung Kim, Dong Shim Hwang, 2 Sherpas, Jumik Bote and Pasang Bote, cousins, and team leader Mr. Kim. An American team, which comprised of Eric Meyer, Fredrik Strang, a Serbian team, namely Dren Mandic, Pedrag Zagorac, and Iso Planic, and a French team, Uga de Bared, and a high-altitude porter, HAP, Yehang Bag, coupled with soloists like Alberto Sarang from Spain and Marco Confortola from Italy. These climbers from various regions came to conquer K2, the Savage Mountain, which lies near Pakistan's northern border with China, a mountain contemplated by mountaineers to be more challenging to conquer than Mount Everest, which is the world's highest peak, having been known to be vertical, rockier and more prone to sudden severe weather. And as a growing child, Wilco van Rooyen, the mysterious K2 survivor, had always loved walking with his parents in the Alps. Eventually, when he got to the age of 16, he started climbing and was so curious to discover everything there was to find out about ropes and knots. He managed to obtain a degree in electronics and prepared to follow his father into engineering, but he knew it wasn't for him. So he decided to work with friends fixing houses to subsidize the climbing trips. Ultimately, he stopped working as an electrician, devoted himself to climbing, and supported himself by traveling the country and giving companies motivational speeches. He told people how he had tackled the North Pole, the South Pole, and Everest. And most of all, he told them about the first time he attempted K2 in 1995 and got smashed on his face and arm by a stone. Not deterred by the previous incident, he took another trip to K2 because he had this drive to prove to all the people around him that he could do K2, that he could climb Everest without oxygen, that he could go to the North Pole, that he could survive for 80 days on the South Pole. Again, in 2006, he went back with McDonald. That time, the Irishman was hit on the head and broke his skull. In 2008, after getting his wife's approval, who had thought mountaineering to be a romantic activity, the unrelenting Van Rooyen, who perceived climbing as a milestone, got the chance to head one of the teams tackling K2. As many as they were, they began the last leg of their climb to conquer K2, Mount Everest's slightly shorter but far more dangerous sister, whose peak towering, glistening and pyramid-like above them, laden with snow from recent storms. But along the way, things went wrong. Mistakes and bad decisions caused 11 people to die. Some slipped to their death and vast blocks of ice struck most of them. In addition, some climbers were stranded at the top. Earlier on before the summit, the whole month of July had been horrible for climbing conditions that climbers had to wait for a weather window at the end of July or the beginning of August. Every one of the expedition's team waited eagerly for that exact moment. They had to wait at Camp 4 to get through to the bottleneck, where some have waited for almost 2 months. Usually, as a norm, the months preceding the summit push were used for acclimatization and preparing for the camps higher on the mountain. The highest of them was Camp 4, which was over 7,800 meters above sea level. Then the most dangerous section of the climb was the bottleneck, a steep collar which had a narrow gully overhung by Sir Axe. From the ice fields east of the summit, a crack is a block of a column of glacial ice, commonly house-sized or larger, and they are dangerous to mountaineers since they may break down with little or no warning. When Wilco left for K2, his son was only 7 months old. Deciding to leave was that challenging for him, but he decided to put things into compartments and concentrate on his job. With July's end approaching and forecast improving weather, several groups arrived at Camp 4 on Thursday, the 31st of July, in preparation to push the summit as soon as the weather would permit. Members of many of the teams decided to work together for the Friday, August 1st ascent. A few independent climbers also pushed for the summit that morning. The Sherpas prepared fixed lines before midnight. Ultimately, the most experienced Sherpa had to go back down with symptoms of high-altitude sickness, and his unofficial leadership of the Sherpas was sorely missed because his presence was much needed. He had summoned K2 before, and without his experience, there was going to be a knowledge gap. So with him leaving, confusion followed, and the ropes that were left behind were placed too far down for the slope from the bottleneck. By the time the climbing group started upward at 3 AM, they found out that the Sherpas had started planting lines right before Camp 4, where they were not needed up until the bottleneck, and then had run out of rope just above the bottleneck. It was the fixing of the rope that caused that dangerous unplanned delay in the climb schedule. They soon ran out of luck when they were on the way up the last 2,000 feet, as a Serbian climber detached himself from the rope to pass under another climber who fell to his death. And minutes later, the Serbs' high-altitude porter followed suit in a bid to recover the Serbian's body. For Van, it was his first time witnessing death on the mountain. Van Rooyen's team eventually got to the summit at 7 PM, when it was too late because it was completely dark. With no knowledge of the impending disaster, two of his partners descended that night to the lower altitude of Camp 4. By the time Van Rooyen was all ready to go, the avalanche had cut the ropes and they could not go. But the chunk of the glacier which cracked and came crashing swept Van into the bottleneck, and the traverse, which was known as the Death Zone, above 8,000 meters, is 26,000 feet with 4 other climbers, including McDowell, leaving them without ropes, starved for oxygen, and with feet desperately cold. For a few hours and days, some of those still left on K2 fought their way to safety, and while some fell to their deaths, others were simply lost forever in the cold wastes of the mountain. The following day, the clouds which had descended on the mountain made it almost unthinkable for the climbers to see each other. But somehow, Van Rooyen managed to descend the perilous bottleneck, where so many of the others met their deaths when hit by the ice. He got struck by snow blindness and he became delirious and frozen, so he told the other 2 climbers he had to descend now while he still had vision, and left them at their bivvy site. Unfortunately, he lost his way, and although Van had his satellite phone, he wasn't able to read the numbers of his teammates. He rather hallucinated while hearing voices and seeing imaginary people who didn't rescue him. Then he came across the 3 real people and wished it was another hallucination. They were 3 Koreans knotted in their ropes, hanging upside down, dying. Only one could talk, and he asked for clothes to keep him warm. For 3 days, Van Rooyen was stuck at the top of K2, the world's second highest peak, bordering Pakistan and China, where only 305 people have reached the top, with 76 people dead in their attempt to ascend it, most on their way down. It wasn't odd to think that Van Rooyen was dead because of the frostiness and the lack of oxygen, but surprisingly, Van Rooyen survived another night, although he was even weaker the next day. He fell asleep for a couple of hours. When asked, he said he was not sure if it was tiredness or that he lost consciousness. Eventually, when he woke up, the clouds parted and he spotted a gully, and through that, he was able to escape and unwittingly head for his camp. Notwithstanding the frostbite, he managed to get back to base camp, where he got airlifted to a military hospital in Pakistan after surviving the accident. In all, 11 lost their lives in what has been the worst episode on K2 since 1986, when 13 climbers died over 2 weeks. It was one of the worst disasters in mountaineering history, and some people died due to the mistakes of laying ropes improperly in the bottleneck, being the precipitous climb just below the summit, while the rest died because they couldn't find Camp 5. Van confirms this while speaking on the disaster from his hospital bed after surviving the accident, adding that poor preparations had contributed to one of the worst ever mountaineering disasters. He further suggested that the advanced climbers laid ropes in the wrong places on the world's second highest mountain, hampering the climb of several teams of mountaineers and ultimately contributing to the deaths of 3 of the climbers on his team. He went on to say that the biggest mistake we made was that we tried to make agreements. One would think this incident would make Royan decide to stop attempting to climb mountains, but surprisingly, he didn't think so. To him, this is because as a mountaineer you know these things can happen. He says that if and when his feet recover, he will climb more than 8,000-meter mountains. And that even though it is awful that so many people died on this expedition, it will be good for business. Royan went on to say that while he lost his way and got stuck on the mountain, he didn't shed tears. At that moment, he had accepted that he would die there because he knows only too well what impact it has on his wife and his son, who was barely 7 months old when he left. It must have been disheartening for him to have lost a climbing friend, his toes, all the people he met up there and befriended, like the Norwegian newlyweds, of which the wife saw her husband fall to his death. But more painful was the knowledge that his wife and child had experienced something they would never sign up for because of the choices he made. And yet he would not have wanted to have missed it. What do you think of Wilco van Rooyen? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more disaster stories on mountaineering. Thanks for watching.